Good evening, folks. Could you please take your seats? I want to welcome all of you to the kickoff of our 2020 through 2024 CIP plan. Tonight is the first meeting of 13 scheduled meetings, and it's great to see everybody here. I want to go through some logistics of tonight's meeting before we get started. First of all, we have a Spanish language interpreter here in the room. His name is Terrence. I'll ask him to stand up and say a few words in Spanish for those that might not understand English.
De que si hay alguien aquí, por si acaso, alguien que habla español y que prefiere tener el servicio de intérprete, aquí estoy a sus órdenes.
Thank you, Terrence. Also, we have flyers outlining the schedule of public meetings at the table where you came in the front entrance there. I would encourage you to take those back with you and share them with friends and family and such, and encourage them to get out and come to some of these other public meetings across the Commonwealth. Our public comment period begins today and will run through close of business on June 7th. Many different ways for you to weigh in. You can do so tonight with your comments. We do have 2 wireless mics that will be circulating. If you want to ask a question or provide a comment tonight, we have someone recording those comments that will be included in the final draft that we prepare for the boards. And we also have questionnaires or comment sheets that you can fill out. They are also located at the back of the room. And you'll hear through tonight's presentation many other different ways in which you can comment from the privacy of your own home. I also want to mention that we do have the Metropolitan Planning Organization here. They're a regional organization that provides input to the statewide, to the capital investment plan for MassDOT. If you have any questions about what they do and how you might want to get involved with them, please see the young lady at the back of the room at the table with all the material. And with that, I want to introduce, before we get to the presenter tonight, the Director of Planning in our group upstairs for MassDOT, Michelle Ho. Before we get to her presentation, I want to introduce Secretary Pollack and General Manager Poftek to open up with a few words tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, and thanks to the many MBTA and MassDOT employees who are here this evening and who work to make this evening possible. I don't want to name everyone because I will undoubtedly miss some, but there's an immense amount of work, months of work every year that actually go into building the combined capital investment plan for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and the MBTA. I want to also reinforce what Rick said about our partners at the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And I'll talk a little bit during my opening remarks about how important it is for those of you who are here tonight because you're interested in how we invest transportation dollars to also understand the role of the MPO, especially this year as they're all doing their long-range plans. So we create a 5-year rolling capital investment plan. What that means is the first of those covered our state fiscal years 2017 through 2021, and this is the 4th time that we have basically updated and made adjustments to that plan. After 5 years, we will really do what I would call more of a reset, where we will have an opportunity to have a larger policy discussion. This year's is more of a builds on the work of the last 3 years. It's still a pretty substantial document. We've worked hard at both MassDOT and the T to not just make our plan a collection of projects, but actually a strategic investment portfolio that is actually built from what we call programs. So a program is a collection of investments that achieve something. On the highway side, our bridge program is a collection of investments designed to improve the condition of our bridges so we have fewer structurally deficient bridges. On the T side, the Orange Line and Modernization Program is a collection of investments that collectively will allow the Orange Line to carry more passengers passengers and be more reliable in the future. So there are 69 of those investment programs in the CIP, and then each program has a series of projects underneath it. So there are actually over 2,000 individual projects that will be done in the next 5 years. And the other thing I should mention is this is a fully financed plan. This is not a wish list of 2,000 projects or a wish list of $18.3 billion. Every dollar is there. It's already there. We don't need any new taxes or revenues to pay for it. So we've grown this plan since the first year. It was a $15.1 billion plan. Last time around, it was a $17.3 billion plan. Now it's an $18.3 billion plan with 69 investment programs and over 2,100 projects in it. As we build the plan from these programs, we also have priorities that both the Massachusetts Department of Transportation Board and the MBTA's Fiscal and Management Control Board have adopted. Our number one priority is making the system more reliable. We do that by fixing our assets that we have allowed to get into bad condition. And our number two priority is to modernize us. So if we have an asset like that's falling apart and we fix it, that's great, but we might also not just want to fix it. We might want to make it safer, or we might want to make it more accessible to people with disabilities, or we might want to improve its capacity. So we call that modernization. And then expansion is when we build new things into the system. And one of the things you can see from this slide, this is our last 3 5-year plans and this one. So the green and blue combined, which are about 3/4 of all of those pies, represent the fact that about 3/4 of our $18.3 billion plan are spent on reliability and modernization. But what you can see is that green, which is reliability, and blue, which is modernization, modernization has gotten bigger. Because as we've gotten into this process, we've realized that many of our assets don't just need to be fixed, they need to be modernized. And so we've actually put more money into modernization so that when we're done with this multi-year effort to fix our system, it will not just be that the assets are in good shape, they will serve the needs of the 21st century. So the plan is also strategic in that it's focused. We can't do everything for everyone everywhere, so there's a few things that we are trying to achieve. I would say there's 3 broad objectives. On the highway side, our objective is that there are parts of the system, roads and bridges, that we have allowed to deteriorate to the point where they need to be fixed, and that is our focus. The general manager, Steve Poftak, is going to come up in a moment after me and talk about what the T's focus areas are. And then the third important focus is while these are mostly state and federal funds, we know that the cities and towns, our 351 cities and towns, also own important parts of the transportation system and need to invest in their assets as well. And so we program hundreds of millions of dollars in this plan for cities and towns. So on the highway side, as you go through the plan, you'll see we really focused on 3 areas, and Michelle Ho will talk about this in more detail. One is our roadways, not our interstate highways. Our interstate highways, 93% of our interstate highways are in good or excellent condition. But our bigger roads that aren't interstate highways are not, where our target is to get 70% of those in good or excellent condition. So we've added money to the plan this year, a significant amount of money, over $150 million, to move towards that target. We also have bridges. Over the last 8 years, MassDOT has been doing an accelerated bridge program with funding from our legislative colleagues. There's a 8-year, $3 billion program. People say, oh, the accelerated bridge program is ending, so how are you going to make sure we keep fixing bridges? Well, there's $2.1 billion in this plan for bridges. None of which essentially is the accelerated bridge program. That's all spent. And then finally, right here in Boston, what some of you probably think of as the big dig, we have something called the Metropolitan Highway System. It's the roads and bridges and tunnels. We have the largest tunnel system in the United States, managed by MassDOT. And while some of them, like the Ted Williams, are pretty new, others, like the Sumner, are over a century old. We did a report last year that identified $1.2 billion of deferred maintenance that needed to be fixed over the next decade. This 5-year plan puts a very big down payment on addressing that problem by programming $800 million towards fixing the Metropolitan Highway System. As far as municipal needs, the program that many of you have probably heard about is Chapter 90. That's a reimbursement program. Cities and towns are allocated a specific amount of money. We allocate $200 million a year, but it's important to note that cities can keep spending that money. So if they have money from prior years, it does not, like a lot of other budgeted money, go away. So we will probably actually reimburse $230 million this year. We also have a $10 million a year or $50 million Complete Streets program and another $50 million small bridge program. In addition, and this is where our colleagues at the Metropolitan Planning Organizations come in, about $250 million a year in Massachusetts in federal funds matched by state funds are actually, the projects are decided by these regional entities called the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So if you're here tonight to talk about a project you would like to see included in the plan, there's actually two kind of doors into the capital plan. One is through this evening's hearings. That's called the Capital Investment Plan, or the CIP. There's also something called the STIP, and that's really the 13 MPOs taking that $238 million in federal funds and deciding what's important, and that covers the cost of many larger municipal projects that could never be built with Chapter 90 money. So that's another big source of municipal funding. In closing and in turning things over to the general manager, the last thing I would say is that delivering for MassDOT 1,600 projects, spending over $10 billion is a huge challenge. And yes, we need the money to make the projects happen, but delivering a capital program, as both MassDOT and the T are acutely aware, involves more than dollars. And we are hard at work at MassDOT and the MBTA in sort of creating organizations that are built to be able to make the kind of investments that the system needs, and we know you, our customers, want. So we have internal and external capacity constraints. We're working to overcome them. But I would also say, especially because we're standing here in Boston, that there are real limits on how many things we can do at one time. We need to coordinate dozens, hundreds of projects. We need to make sure people can still get where they need to go. We can't, if it doesn't matter how much money I have, I am not going to start fixing the Sumner Tunnel until we finish the North Washington Street Bridge and the Tobin, because there has to be some way to get in and out of town to the north. And I have to figure out what order to do the Prudential Tunnel and the Alston Turnpike project in, because I can't actually be working on both of them at the same time. Similarly, the MBTA is literally running bus diversions, multiple bus diversions now every weekend, and closing parts of the system early in the evening. And at the $18 billion level that we have now achieved, we really are starting to run up against some real challenges to make sure that we can deliver the upgrades we need to our system without actually making it impossible to get anywhere in an already congested metropolitan area. And again, these are not excuses, they are realities. We will deliver the $18.3 billion capital program, but we face a lot of challenges in doing that. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for participating. If you choose not to speak tonight, I hope you will at least fill in a comment form or go online. And again, I also encourage you, your MPO is not only programming 5 years like we do, they are in the process of doing long-range plans, projects that we can't do in the next 5 years, either for lack of money or, more importantly, because we just can't do everything at once. The MPOs are going to lay out what's the next set of priorities from 2026 through 2030 and 2030 through 2040. So participating in that long-range planning process in your part of the state is an important part of laying the groundwork for what we will do after the 5 years that this capital plan covers. Thank you again for coming. General Manager, you're up.
First, I want to thank everyone for coming and participating tonight in their interest. I particularly want to recognize Representative Holmes and Milton Town Administrator Mike Dennehy for joining us. Appreciate all the interest in our capital plan. Obviously, the MBTA's priority in putting together this capital plan has been increasing the reliability and modernizing the system. We are seeking to accelerate our level of capital investment to meet these goals. We have been tasked by the Fiscal and Management Control Board to address the capital needs of the MBTA over the next 15 years. We are several years into that process, and we are putting together a plan to address those capital needs within the 15-year window, which concludes in FY32. Right now, our 5-year goal is to execute the $8 billion CIP from last year, and that includes obviously a significant amount in spending on reliability and modernization. Right now, our projections for this current year is that we will deliver $950 million in capital improvements. Of that $950 million, $775 million goes to reliability and modernization of the system. So I think it's important to distinguish the difference. That delta there in between 950 and 775 is what we're spending on expansion. So the vast majority of the MBTA's spending is focused on reliability and modernization. Part of reaching these goals, to get to the level of spending we want, is filling the pipe with contracts, because you get the contract out and then you spend it out over a number of years, and the MBTA went through some lean years in the middle of this decade where it was not getting out an appropriate level of contracts. I'm really pleased to say that we are on a trajectory to award $1 billion in new construction and vehicle contracts for this year. So that's going to translate into spending in future years. And of course, we're always working to make sure that not only we deliver, it's not just about spending, it's about spending wisely and spending efficiently, that we are delivering projects on time and on budget. Right now, what I'm showing you is the MBTA's spending over the past few years. The green bars there show you reliability and modernization, which I've emphasized, and the gray bars are the spending on expansion. What you see there is a real significant growth, particularly in reliability and modernization. T spent $502 million in 2016, and we believe we're on target to spend $775 million in reliability and modernization in FY19. This is growth that we seek to continue. This is what is going to make the system more reliable, and it's a real focus of ours. We've made significant progress with the investments that we've made. Just a handful of examples would be, we've refreshed 50% of the bus fleet at this point. 40% of the bus fleet is new. It's been purchased within the last 3 years. 10% of the bus fleet has been refurbished over the last 3 years. And we think this is a significant improvement, not only in reliability, but also in our customers' experience. I have a million examples. I won't belabor the point, but the types of investments we're making, we believe, really make a difference in how customers experience the service. This CIP that we are presenting tonight reflects $9.4 billion in available funding sources during the 5-year period. And it breaks them out into a variety of categories. Again, I won't go through each one of these individual categories, but what you see here is $3.3 billion for reliability, $3.7 billion for modernization, and then $2.4 billion for the 2 major expansion projects that the T is undertaking right now. One of the things that is in this plan that is new, if you look in the middle of the middle bar, the light blue green line transformation is currently programmed at $925 million. What this is we've taken a variety of projects, some of them that were in the former CIP, some of them that are newly introduced, and we've collapsed them into this one project so that we can plan for the future of the Green Line in a more integrated way. What this also contains within it is a down payment towards a longer-term procurement of what we are calling the Type 10 supercars, which are larger, higher capacity vehicles that we plan to procure over the later part of the next decade. That's going to create, that's basically going to double the capacity of the Green Line over time. I'd also note the other item that is new in there, it's at, I guess it's at $999 million. We couldn't get quite to $1 billion, but it's South Coast Rail. This is a program that has been in the planning stages for quite some time. We are pleased now that it is fully funded from Commonwealth funding and will be executed by the MBTA. It's an important investment for our customers on the South Coast. Just sort of taking a look at those numbers in a slightly different way, what you see is reliability and modernization from the previous CIP to the CIP we're presenting tonight increases by 5%. The mix changes a little, and that is because we have reallocated some projects that were formerly individual reliability projects are now being treated as modernization because they're in that green line transformation category that I showed you previously. The CIP that we are presenting reflects available funds as programmed for specific projects. This results in a very aggressive front-loaded plan, and that's what you see. I'm just showing you reliability and modernization, not expansion, but that results in a very front-loaded plan. What I am proposing is the spending targets you see on the right. I believe these are spending targets that are achievable by the T and will allow us to eventually get to the point you see in FY24 where the MBTA is able to consistently spend $1.5 billion a year in reliability and modernization. And getting to that $1.5 billion level is extremely important, and I'll demonstrate for you why on the next slide. Again, it's not just a question of programming projects and identifying funding sources. The Secretary talked a little bit about the difficulties of doing all these projects while we are keeping the MBTA running, doing all these projects in the context of a living, breathing, cosmopolitan region that you simply can't shut everything down and work on it for 2 years. So part of it is getting better at planning, getting more efficient at planning. Part of it is also, frankly, adding capacity within the MBTA. I'm pleased to say that we have hired a Chief of Capital Program, and that is Jay Nider. He's over there. This is his second day, so go easy on him. But we have high expectations. I don't expect Jay to do it all by himself, so we are adding 80 FTEs to a variety of our capital programs, and we're also taking specific steps to address some of the bottlenecks that prevent us from doing as many projects as we'd like. I started by talking about the 15-year window we have to address the MBTA's capital needs. I also talked about getting the MBTA to a point where it's spending consistently $1.5 billion a year in reliability and modernization. What I'm showing you here is the plan that gets us to so what you see there is the intended spend on reliability and modernization. Layered on top of it is the spending that we will spend on the Green Line extension and South Coast Rail. So these are fully funded expansion projects that we currently have underway. This plan allows us to address the $10 billion capital need, which we estimate that the MBTA has, and gets us to a point where we have burned down that $10 billion capital need over time. Obviously, this is a very aggressive plan, but I believe the ramp up gives us the opportunity to actually achieve it. So again, this represents this CIP, this capital investment plan represents a very important down payment on this plan. It's a very important set of investments to get the MBTA into the condition where it is providing consistent, reliable service for the people of Boston. And with that, again, thank you for your attendance and your interest, and look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you very much.
So good evening, everyone. You've heard from the Secretary and you've heard from the General Manager. And as I am Michelle Hof, Director of Capital Planning for MassDOT. We couldn't pull this off without the work of a lot of dedicated people throughout the organization. And I'm joined here tonight by Samantha Silverberg, who's the Director of Capital Planning at the MBTA. And we all work closely together to pull together the capital plan that we are talking to you about this evening. So I just want to recognize that there's a lot of folks, and it takes a lot of time to pull this plan together. So As the Secretary mentioned, our capital plan is a 5-year rolling plan, and it continues to significant and sustained investments in our transportation network throughout the Commonwealth. We use a variety of funding sources for the capital plan. Some of the projects are eligible for multiple funding sources, and some are only eligible for certain funding sources. So it's important to remember that when we pull together the capital plan, we look not only at the investments that we have chosen, but at how they can be funded. So there are fiscal considerations that are taken into account when we build the capital plan, and we are trying to achieve the targets and performance targets as the Secretary outlined that we are focused on. So it's organized, as the Secretary said, we focus on the reliability of our system first and foremost, and then the modernization of our existing assets. And then finally, we are looking at investments that increase the capacity of our transportation network or add additional new modes of transportation. That could be bike and ped accommodations, multi-use trails, and the like. This capital plan reflects $18.3 billion in investments in the transportation assets throughout the Commonwealth. 73% of those investments, 73% of the 18.3, are for reliability and modernization projects. So as the Secretary said, we're doing an update. This is not a top to bottom revisit the capital plan. This is our 4th iteration of the capital plan that we established back in 2017. So we've basically updated the 20-23 list of projects that we had in last year's capital plan, and then we've added our 5th year, 2024, with new projects that might get introduced in the 24 timeframe. Again, the plan includes our priorities, a financial plan for all of our projects that we have selected, and then we have, as part of the capital plan, we have the recommended list of investments that we are proposing for this next 5-year window. We update it annually. It encompasses all of the MBTA and the MassDOT divisions. That includes Highway Division, the Rail and Transit Division, and those are the assets that are not MBTA, rail assets owned by MassDOT, and transit assets that are primarily managed by the regional transit authorities, along with our Aeronautics Division that manages investments across the 39 public use airports in the Commonwealth, and then the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and then obviously we have information technology investments and planning efforts that I work on at the planning department. Our plans are approved, our capital plan is approved by the Joint MassDOT Board and the Fiscal Management and Control Board, and we will be presenting the CIP for their approval at the June meeting. And again, one of the important things is we fit within the Commonwealth's 5-year capital plan, so we're a subset of their capital plan. This slide we like to show because it represents sort of the timeline that we follow when we pull together the capital plan. We start back in, well, we really start in January, but in December, but this slide has us starting in January, where we really are looking at refining our programs that we may select, and the Secretary talked about programs being a collection of investments, so the bridge program or the highway program. The General Manager talked about a new program that the T has introduced in this plan, the Green Line Transformation. So we look at our programs, we refine the scoring criteria by which we evaluate new investments that would make up the bundle of investments that go into those programs, and we score all of our new expansion programs and our modernization programs. And then we proceed along the timeline to where we are today, which is where we have a draft for public comment and for your input. We presented the draft CIP at the board meeting this past Monday, got approval to release for public comment. We will continue to engage the public in public meetings throughout the Commonwealth. 13 public meetings are scheduled. But as we go forward in the next period, during the public comment period, we're continuing to map our investments, and we're also doing an equity analysis. So we look at the proposed list of investments on a geographic basis across the Commonwealth and on a social equity basis, because we want to make sure that our proposed list of investments does not have any undue impact on disadvantaged communities, whether it be low income or limited English proficiency. And we also want to make sure that we have an equitable distribution of investments across the Commonwealth. And in June, we come back to the board, we present a summary and analysis of the comments that we have heard on the draft plan, as well as the results of our equity analysis for consideration by the joint boards in June. So where we are today and what we're going to talk about is we're going to review obviously our capital investment goals and priorities, talk a little bit about our new programs that we have in the capital plan, walk you through some highlighted projects in the Boston region. We want to show you how easy the capital plan is to navigate. It's an online format that we call a story map. We've upgraded it this year, so I'm interested in everybody's feedback after they have a chance to use it. And obviously, we are really looking forward to your feedback on the draft plan. So one of the things that I think and the Secretary stressed is that we work closely with our municipal partners, are the MPOs and the municipalities throughout the Commonwealth. And I think it's just important to try to explain for everybody, how does the CIP align with the other annual plan that we produce, which is the State Transportation Improvement Program, and that's the STIP. The STIP governs all of the federal funding that we receive from Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration. So those projects that are eligible for federal funding are programmed by our 13 MPO, the 13 regional MPO organizations that we deal with across the Commonwealth, our municipal partners. They have a slate of projects that they select. Those get pulled into their individual TIPs, their individual transportation improvement plans, and then they get the aggregation of all the 13 TIPs is what comprises the STIP that we use. And we submit the STIP to Federal Highway for approval. The CIP is not approved by Federal Highway. Obviously, it's approved by our boards. But the CIP encompasses all forms of all sources of investment dollars for the capital plan. So whether it's the MBTA revenue bonds, state bond cap, special obligation bonds, or on the MassDOT side, the net revenues from our toll facilities, those are all the funding sources available to us. They're included in the CIP, and the STIP only has the federally funded projects. And as the Secretary said, there's a few ways that you can get a project into the CIP, one of which is through the MPO process. Obviously, you can work with your local organizations in your cities and towns, the local DPW director, the highway districts, the local planning agencies, the MassDOT planning entities to get projects into the CIP as well as through the MPO process. So, and as we talked about also how important it is and the focus that we have on our partnership with the municipalities across the Commonwealth, the CIP includes both the state and federal funding that goes to the municipalities. We have over a third of our federal money that we get in gets allocated to each of the MPOs by formula that the MPOs then select their slate of projects. It's a significant amount of money, along with the annual program, the Chapter 90 program, which we have included in the CIP at $200 million a year, which is the current legislated amount. And then we have our Complete Streets program and our Small Municipal Bridge program. Both of those are grant programs that award funds to municipalities for projects in their town, city or town. So, excuse me, program budgets, as we discussed earlier, but in the Secretary's remarks, she talked about program budgets. There's the highway program, has a bridge program, or they have a non-interstate pavement program for those roads that are not on the interstate. We have a track and signals program at the MBTA. We have a airport pavement program in the aeronautics division. How do we set those program budgets? How do we determine how much we should be spending? So there's a number of things that we look at. We're moving the whole organization towards a more strategic approach to this. We take into consideration performance targets that get set on an annual basis through the tracker report that gets submitted to the legislature. We look at federal requirements, federal targets that are for the National Highway System for bridges and pavements. The Secretary mentioned non-interstate pavement target of 70% are in good condition, good or excellent condition. These are targets that help us size how much we should be investing. We use a planning for performance tool to help us do scenario planning to say, so if we invest X million per year, what will be our outcome over the long term in terms of our target that we want to achieve. So we use it for sizing the non-interstate pavement program or the bridge program. Bridge program looks at the percent deck area in poor condition. We also have submitted, well, we will be submitting for Federal Highway, to Federal Highway, a transportation asset management plan for the Highway Division, which is due in June. Again, that is a program and a federally required plan that will look at the proposed targets that we have for our bridge and pavement programs. The MBTA and the RTA submitted their transit asset management plan to FTA earlier this year in October. And then we have all planning study recommendations, including the recommendations from Focus 40 that help inform the T's selection and sizing of their program budgets. As the Secretary mentioned, we have a total of 69 investment programs in this 5-year plan, and the MBTA has included the MBTA Green Line Transformation Program that the GM talked about. We also have a new program for the MBTA, the Expansion Project Development Program, which is really focused on the early stage planning and design for some of the expansion projects that were identified as next priorities in the Focus 40 plan. That's the strategic plan for the MBTA that was recently approved. We also talked about the South Coast Rail Program, which is the full funding for Phase 1 of the South Coast Rail Program. That is included on the MBTA as a new program this year. We did program some monies last year in last year's capital plan for South Coast Rail, and it was under the rail group on the MassDOT side, but only for 19, fiscal year 19. And then finally, we have a small program under transit called Workforce Transportation Options, which uses CMAQ funds. Those are Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funds to help fund and leverage private sector investment to provide workforce transportation options to communities throughout the Commonwealth. It will also be a competitive grant program. What we've shown here is how we tend to look at our investments across our priorities. The green represents our reliability investments. So the top of the chart is our reliability investments by each of the MassDOT MBTA divisions. The blue represents the level of modernization investments, and this is on a spending standpoint. And then the black represents expansion investments. So as you can see on the MBTA, we have the South Coast Rail and the Green Line extension programs clearly represented in terms of the amount we anticipate spending over the next 5 years. The pie chart just, again, reinforces the percentage of the proposed spend under this year's capital plan for reliability and modernization and expansion, along with the Chapter 90 program and the planning and shared services investments. And the numbers are represented in the table. So it's $18.3 billion for the next 5 years. It is a significant increase over last year's plan, and it has been continued to increase since the 17 plan. We always like to give everybody sort of an indication of some of the projects that are ongoing in the capital plan, or that will be represented in this capital plan. You know about the North Washington Street Bridge. I'm sure most folks have heard about that project. We have a project that we will be doing on the Metropolitan Highway System for the Prudential Tunnel. It's a ventilation rehabilitation project that'll start, I believe, in '22. And then we have a multi-use trails project for the South Bay Harbor. These are all highway investments. On the MBTA, they continue to work on the red and orange line improvements on the track and signal work and the vehicle procurements for the red and orange line. They have a Cabot Yard upgrade project, and then they're going to be working on the for the Green Line on the Heinz Station and a number of improvements at that station. We reflect two regional transit authority investments in this capital plan for the Boston region, Cape Ann and Metro West. Both have combined, it's about $2.1 million that they have selected for investments in this plan. And the RMV will be updating its Roslindale branch, and they will be rolling out what they call their alternative service channels to improve customer service and access to registry services. Aeronautics, I've just highlighted one of the airports in the region for Norwood. They'll be doing some capital improvement programs in Norwood. So as we talked about, we have an interactive format for the story map for the capital plan. So this will be posted online tomorrow, and this is the landing page for the capital plan. And you can click on any of the items in the table of contents that takes you directly to that section. Otherwise, you can just scroll down using page down on your computer, and you'll scroll through you'll be able to scroll through the whole capital plan. The text is on the left, and usually graphics or photos will be on the right to illustrate it. So we should have this online tomorrow for your review. And I have a page that tells where the website is that you can find the capital plan. We like to give folks an indication of some of the projects that we've been doing from the 19 to 23 capital plan. Aeronautics anticipates completing the administration building at the Plymouth Municipal Airport. MBTA has recently completed the Blue Hill Avenue station on the Fairmont line, and they have their new Green Line Type 9 vehicles that will have been introduced into service. You've heard about the new Green Line 10 super vehicles that will be introduced into service under the Green Line Transformation Program, but they've introduced the Green Line Type 9 into service already. Transit's funded 443 replacement vehicles at the RTAs. That's to support all of their network of buses, their bus route network at the individual RTAs. The rail group has done a substantial amount of work to get ready for the Greenfield pilot project that will be initiated this summer. I won't go through all of these, but this just gives you a flavor of some of the investments, the capital investments that we make with the dollars available to us. And as we discussed earlier, how important it is that we get the public to participate in the capital planning process. Your input helps inform our investment decisions and helps us focus on what we are doing in the capital plan and if we're targeting the right types of investments. So we encourage your participation. Talk to your representatives, your municipal leaders. Please submit a comment. This is where you can submit or record a comment at mass.cip@state.ma.us. That'll take you directly to a comment page, and we look forward to your input. We have 13 public meetings scheduled across the Commonwealth. Tonight's the first public meeting. There's also another one going on in Danvers tonight. And then, as you can see, this is the schedule for all of the public meetings in the next couple of weeks. Comment period closes June 7th, so we hope to hear from you by then. And you can comment. There is an online comment tool as part of the CIP document, and you can comment directly online, or you can submit at the website we just showed you. Or even submit an email or letter directly to MassDOT. We'll get it. This is the website for the CIP document. It's mass.gov/mass./CIP. Will take you to the online CIP document. Thank you. Are there any questions?